We can see you, Mr. Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Rollings. Can everybody see and hear me okay? Yep.
Yes, we can.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. With good afternoon. Obviously, we're slightly delayed start, so it's now 2:30. Hoping this is going to work for anybody who's wanting to observe or follow the proceedings. So apologies for the slight delay in starting this particular session. So this is the final currently scheduled session for the hearings into examination of the Crawley local plan. It's this afternoon is just a session for ourselves and with the Borough Council. Firstly, to just conclude on matter 11 on monitoring, and then to go through a sort of a final administrative session on sort of the next steps for the examination process while we're still in hearings mode. Obviously, the council by now probably well aware of who we are, and I think we've now met everybody we're likely to hear from the Borough Council, so I won't go through the normal introductions. I just want to clarify with Charlotte, please, whether she still technically needs to do the privacy notice or anything for this afternoon's session, given it's just ourselves and the Borough Council.
I don't think it's necessary for this afternoon because it's just yourselves and the like you say and the council.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
And it's also published on the examination webpage too. So. Okay,
great. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so in terms of this afternoon's session, please, a brief discussion around monitoring, and then, as I say, kind of next steps. So in terms of matter 11 and monitoring, we've asked an MIQ at question 11.1, having seen the council's monitoring and implementation framework on plan submission, as to whether that's an adequate framework for monitoring going forward. The council set out its response in its matter 11 statement, but I would like to invite the council now to perhaps just briefly outline or explain the kind of monitoring processes it undertakes in support of the local plan, in terms of ensuring that or keeping a check on whether policies are doing what they're intended to do, and then potentially within the kind of the wider framework, that obviously there's a legal requirement to consider plan review within a 5-year period, whether there are other mechanisms that, if for whatever reason the council needed to instigate a full or partial review as a result of monitoring, how the framework would sort of come into play in that regard. So is it Mr. Warren on monitoring?
Okay, I'm just waiting. Oh, sorry, I'm forgetting that we're in a different format. So I was waiting to be lit up in red. Yes. So yes, you've probably seen we've got this short section in the plan itself, paragraphs 1 to 34 to 1 to 37 in relation to monitoring and review. We say that the plan will be subject to continual monitoring through the authority monitoring report, and the local plan monitoring and implementation framework is kind of setting out the basis on which that's proposed to be taken forward. So we took a similar approach in relation to the adopted 2015 plan, whereby alongside the plan itself there was a monitoring framework document, and subsequent to the adoption of the plan, we have been conducting annual authority monitoring reports, which have focused in particularly on the key indicators that were indicated in that were highlighted in the adopted monitoring framework, but also at a sort of appropriate stage, taking a wider view really to look at the effectiveness by which the plan's being implemented, and through that we've been able to take various steps where we've identified areas of sort of incomplete implementation, and that process is sort of documented through the authority monitoring reports which we've produced, and we have included those as documents in the local plan library. So, and for example, we were able to address issues of document requirements, sort of implementation of requirements around document submission through updates to SPDs and the local list, and we would cite other cases where the monitoring is fed into this review. So, for example, in relation to the approach to housing mix. So we think that process has worked relatively well with regard to the adopted plan. So this is something similar, really. So in the monitoring and implementation framework, we identify a number of key indicators on pages 3 and 4, and we've proposed a couple of modifications to that in relation to the transport and the implementation of transport infrastructure alongside development. But the intention would be that the key indicators will be monitored on an annual basis. The wider range of indicators will be things we would look at an appropriate stage, maybe once we're a certain period of time into the implementation of the plan, and then that will inform further steps in terms of local plan review or other measures, you know, whether that's sort of producing other guidance or documentation to support the implementation of the policies. So that's more or less how we propose to monitor the plan.
Thank you. And presumably the preparation of this plan has enabled kind of reflection on if there have been any issues with monitoring as part of the 2015 local plan, for those to kind of be looked at again, and just ensure that indicators are monitorable, if that's an English word, to say, to kind of assess and check that the plan is doing what it intends to do.
That's correct. Yes, we have, as part of the process, we have been careful to try to ensure that the monitors are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. That the sort of SMART approach, and sort of as the officer who has been responsible for the preparation of most of the authority monitoring reports we've done, I've sort of had a significant incentive to ensure that that's the case. We have revised. There's a link as well to the sustainability appraisal, so that includes a range of indicators that are linked to the key sustainability objectives, and the data as well, that the baseline data in the essay will inform the future monitoring process as well. So we've taken care to ensure that the monitoring framework is taking account of what's appropriate in terms of monitoring the actual policies, but also taking into account the key SA indicators as well. But I mean, to a large extent, we would say that the monitoring of the adopted local plan has worked relatively well. So we haven't sort of tried to revolutionise the approach, really.
Okay. And in terms of monitoring the plan, as you say, Mr. Warren, you seem to have kind of the first-hand experience of doing this in relation to the current plan. I mean, I'm assuming most of that can be done by Crawley itself, or are there any sort of wider monitoring kind of arrangements with West Sussex or with the Northern West Sussex authorities? Is there any kind of, or is each authority kind of monitoring your own respective plans? Is there anything that's kind of aggregating upwards for kind of a more strategic picture?
West Sussex do have a role in relation to housing and employment development. So they kind of run an annual survey, including site visits to monitor the status of those, and that takes place, I think, across most of the West Sussex authorities, and West Sussex publish the findings of that separately, and that also feeds into the returns that go into the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. So that process tends to work quite well, and we've tended to rely on that survey for the purpose of monitoring development that's happening, and also the Sussex Biodiversity Record Centre produces reports which they send to us annually that feeds into our authority monitoring report, and also as part of the water neutrality policy, that's going to have to be done on a wider kind of water resource zone wide basis, so that that will be happening as well. It hasn't done previously.
No, but so is there already an agreed kind of approach to monitoring, or is thought being kind of given to that as we speak in terms of the monitoring of that approach, or authorities waiting to see the outcome of this examination and SD4? And
so we, as part of our framework, we've included monitoring of per capita water consumption and net change in water demand within the part of Crawley that falls within the Sussex North Water Resource Zone. We would anticipate that similar arrangements will be happening in other authorities, but I think colleagues may be able to assist if that process has become any more advanced. I think is it Mr. Masson? Yeah. Okay.
Hello there. Yeah, just to provide a bit of an update. I mean, basically, there's as we've mentioned previously, there's a lot of ongoing cross-authority work on this. One other element that's being looked at is the monitoring in terms of where the offsets have come from as well. So just to pick up on that, really. So that's to ensure that there's not double counting effectively of where water offsetting has taken place. So there is going to be effectively we're working towards a pooling of resources. So we have a effectively a ledger almost of where those offsets have taken place, so we will know, again, just to avoid that double counting, to assure that water neutrality is genuinely being achieved and the offsets are not being repeated effectively. So
I see.
there is a wider calling.
So you can, I see. So you can track through and see where those credits have been assigned to. So yeah, you're not duplicating, or the benefit of those credits is not being kind of duplicated. And
absolutely, yeah, that's the intention at the moment.
Okay, that's great. Good. Thank you for that assistance on that point. In terms of monitoring and some sort of overarching considerations, the council's Matter 11 statement touches upon this. I think various parties of kind of various representations have wondered whether there's a need for kind of specific plan review kind of trigger points, or a plan review policy. And I think I've indicated previously that's something I'm probably slightly sceptical about the need for in terms of plan soundness. And as I think the council set out at Power 11.1.2 of its Matter 11 statement, I mean, obviously we'd be looking in any regard in the next 5 years in terms of the need for review. And we've touched upon these other two matters, I think, in previous sessions, but just worth kind of revisiting briefly. So yes, I mean, it seems to make sense that obviously if anything does change in terms of national aviation policy vis-a-vis Gatwick, that would be obviously a significant could have significant implications for spatial strategies within the borough. So that seems an obvious potential trigger point for a review of the local plan. And I think we also mentioned on the water neutrality session that obviously if things progress there in terms of whether Southern Water do ultimately are able to come up with a perhaps a more strategic solution, then that might that would have implications certainly for policy SD4. And I think in that regard, following on from the discussions we were having with the Home Builders Federation and others, I think the council has now given some thought to an additional section to the policy on policy SDC4.
Yeah, I'm happy to pick that up.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's covered in our additional note that we've provided. So I think as a starting point, we felt it'd be helpful just to put all of those modifications into a single place, so you have the context there. Yeah, I think if in terms of the reviewing the requirement for water neutrality, we do think that paragraph 1.37 already provides a mechanism for that. However, we've sort of taken on board the points that were raised in that hearing session, and we think it is helpful effectively to future-proof policy SDC4 to pick up on the requirement that water neutrality may at a future point no longer be required. So the modification is essentially, so we've set that out on page 53 of the schedule of proposed modifications. But what it essentially recognises is that were the water neutrality requirement to be lifted or to fall away for whatever reason, Crawley would still be subject to serious water stress. So effectively, it brings in the standards of policy SDC3 instead. So this is the 110 litres per person per day for residential, or the BREEAM excellent standard for water use for non-domestic. So we think that modification does provide sort of greater certainty as to the water efficiency standards that would apply were water neutrality to fall away, and also it just future-proofs that policy with that additional paragraph 7 that we've suggested. So hopefully that's helpful. I think just the other point to mention is similar wording is included in the Horsham Regulation 19 local plan that's due to be published very soon. So there is that joint up approach across the councils as well.
Thank you for that. I mean, so certainly from reading the proposed modification in the note and in the schedule, I mean, it does seem to remove the kind of the ambiguity that was, you know, something to change in within kind of the first 5 years of the plan period before the council's had an opportunity to kind of consider a more sort of fulsome review. And there's there's no ambiguity, as you say, Mr. Masson, that even if water neutrality is addressed, you're still subject or going to be subject to these particular kind of water consumption requirements, given the wider water environment in Crawley. Yeah, no, that seems to make sense. I think our initial view is that all the changes to policy SD4, you know, likely to necessitate being sort of put together as a main modification, then it would probably make sense to put this in, as you say, you've kind of bundled them together as kind of, so you can see the composite changes, and that's probably likely to be a main modification that we'll recommend and be consulted on. So thank you for the sort of council to giving further thought to that since the part one hearings. Thank you. Are there any further points, council? I've got no further questions on monitoring. If the council's got no further points on matter 11, obviously we've got the monitoring and implementation framework. There's, I think there's a, as we've touched upon, I think there is a proposed modification in terms of, again, I think it follows on from this morning in terms of, again, providing that sort of connectivity through to the kind of the infrastructure delivery schedule.
That's correct, yes. So it's we had an existing indicator related to the delivery of infrastructure in relation to development, but we've kind of given that more definition really, and included it. So that's within the SA. We've kind of changed the wording of that, and also included it within the monitoring and implementation framework as a key indicator. Just so that's you're correct. That's linked to the changes we've just discussed earlier in relation to particularly policy IN1.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. So I've got no further questions or anything I wanted to raise on monitoring. So thank you for the council's contributions on matter 11. That draws now to a close the kind of the various kind of discussions on the individual matters and issues we'd identified for this examination. As indicated in our agenda, this now sort of final part of the discussion is an administrative session with the council, I think really around sort of next steps. It'd probably help me at this point if I do have some people from the council on screen at the same time as part of a discussion. I don't know who would it be. Ms. Brigden, Mr. Page, thank you. Okay, so obviously this session is being recorded, so and we've got the programme officer here in attendance, so there's it's a transparent discussion about the way forward, but it's probably a better use of our time, I think, to have it in this forum rather than a lot of kind of subsequent email exchanges, etc. after the conclusion of these hearings. So what I'm going to do is just kind of work through the agenda items, or the items on the agenda that's previously been circulated, and then if there's anything that the council wishes to clarify or check with us as inspectors, we'll do our best to assist the process. So as I say, we're now the sort of the final, currently scheduled final day of hearing sessions into the plan examination. Our next step will be to issue a sort of post hearings letter to the borough council, and as part of that letter we will summarise what we consider to be the main modifications that will be required, and I'll come on to that under item C of this agenda. Obviously, because we've had part 1 and part 2, we've obviously been able to make some progress on that letter. Obviously, we do need to finalise it in light of last week and today's discussions, but I mean, it shouldn't be too long before the council receives that correspondence, probably in the next couple of weeks. So most likely by the end of this month, so before the end of January. In terms of the process of proposed main modifications, it's an interesting process, and obviously it's the Borough Council's plan, but it's our role as inspectors to recommend, but Borough Councils have to invite us to recommend proposed main modifications through the section 27 request letter. Now, I'm trying to rack my brain as to whether I've seen one in relation yet for Crawley. I don't recall, but if the council wants to correct me and say you've already asked or made that section 20(7) request, please correct me.
We did put it into the letter of submission. So it's in the original submission letter that came with the local plan when we submitted it for its examination, and we specified in that yes, we make the request under the section 27 in brackets for the inspector's modifications.
Okay, thank you for that. End of July seems a long time ago, so thank you for that reminder. That's helpful. Good. So in terms of item 2C and proposed main modification process, we're not today going to sort of go through it all one by one and say this is a main modification, this isn't. I think hopefully the council's kind of appreciated as we've been going through the examination hearings. I mean, I don't think as inspectors we are identifying or have suggested new or proposed main modifications. There are a couple of areas we are going to sort of further reflect on, and that'll be clear within our post hearings letter. I think I'll probably share with the council now. I think we just want to think through a bit further around the employment land requirement issue, and we understand what the council is seeking to do through policy H8 on gypsy and travellers, and I think we, at the end of that discussion, there was a kind of a view as to whether the wording still needs to kind of be reflected on to ensure it's clear to future decision makers exactly what we mean by long-term temporary, short-term temporary, etc. But in all other regards, as we sit here now, I think the main modifications are already within the schedule that the council's prepared. I think the council's been very sort of proactive in thinking ahead, kind of what kind of potential changes might be needed. So I think as part of our post hearings letter, it'll be that clarification from what within Schedule 7E at the moment is a proposed main or something that we feel is necessary as a proposed main modification, because it's something we'll have to recommend as necessary for one of the various tests, usually around plan effectiveness, rather than something more significant like consistency with national policy. As I think I indicated at a previous session, I mean, certainly where the content of policy has kind of evolved further and will certainly have implications for development or future decision makers, those are probably more likely to be proposed main modifications. Not in every regard, but that's certainly sort of the area we tend to focus on. Which will leave a kind of a residual of proposed modifications within 7E, which are entirely for the council. You know, those are factual changes and other things you are presentational changes that are entirely of your choosing to make. They're not things that we need to report on or recommend to you. You can do that to your plan, and it doesn't go to plan soundness, but our post hearings letter will make those kind of distinctions clear. And in terms of assisting us in terms of thinking of sort of the path ahead, it's under our item 2D as the council's kind of process or time frame for proposed modifications. I don't know if at the time you submitted your plan, whether you had delegation to progress main modifications, whether it's something you'll need to report back through various kind of committee paths.
Yeah, I think it depends on the extent. So everything that we have submitted so far as a proposed modification has been through our delegated powers that were granted through the cabinet decisions and the full council decision for the submission of the plan. So from that perspective, we wouldn't be envisaging taking anything back through the committee system prior to going out to a modifications consultation. If there was anything more substantial that did warrant some scrutiny from the councillors, then obviously that would be required, and we would need to go consider what that would mean. And obviously we do have the pre-election period in our elections. We have elections in thirds, so we have elections every year. So that would obviously add to that timetable, because there isn't a further council meeting until I think the July after an election period. So yeah, that it would just depend. But so far as what we've submitted as proposed modifications at this stage, that wouldn't need that further stage. That's been covered by delegations.
Okay, thank you for that. And in terms of the borough council elections, I'm assuming, like a lot of authorities, you would avoid any kind of major decisions or anything. Is it usually 6 weeks in advance of the election date?
Yes, I can confirm on that. We checked this out yesterday. So our pre-election period starts on March the 26th, which would mean a 6-week mods consultation would have to start by Monday the 12th of February to finish on Monday the 25th of March. So obviously, depending on how much further work we need to do, we might be able to turn it around reasonably quickly. And if you did say the end of January and there weren't significant changes to the schedule that we've already suggested, then we would hopefully be able to get out. But obviously it entirely depends on whether there's anything more substantive that we would need to take back through a committee process.
Okay.
If we missed that slot and there wasn't anything more substantive, then we could possibly go out to modification consultation as soon as the elections are completed. So there are options, but it depends on.
And remind me again the date for local elections. It'll be early. Is it early May?
It's Thursday, May the 2nd.
May the 2nd. Okay. And sorry, just to clarify with the council, so if there was something more substantive within the main modifications, you would need to report that not just to, I presume you have a cabinet
We
arrangement,
do,
but
yes.
ultimately it would also need to go to full council?
Possibly not.
Okay.
I think we would need to investigate exactly what delegations there are available for that.
Okay. But the more positive path is, if everything's if we're positive about things, it could start as soon as the 12th of February, conclude on the 25th of March, and then the council presumably be in a position to relatively quickly turn around responses that have been received as part of the proposed main modifications consultation.
Yeah, they'd be likely to be quite focused, wouldn't they? So yes.
Okay. Thank you. And just to double check from our sort of thinking about our resources and programming, are there any other factors or considerations as you sit here now that could affect the remainder of any kind of local plan examination timetable? Are you going to be embroiled to any extent in the forthcoming DCO process, or are the two manageable in terms of where we are or not? Don't answer that, but I'm just trying to think if there's any potential risk around, just the parallel processes of trying to finish the local plan examination process and simultaneously where you might be with the DCO process.
It shouldn't be a problem. The council has brought in additional resource to support the DCO, particularly because myself and Anthony really have had to be focusing on our local plan examination. So we will now step back into supporting them with the DCO, but we do have that additional resource. So hopefully we're over the most significant impact on this team in terms of the local plan. So share the resource a little bit more.
And certainly from my perspective, the priority for me and my job is the local plan. So that resource is still there to keep driving.
Okay. Good. Okay. Well, in terms of then item E, in terms of then obviously we get through main modification consultation subject to what responses are received, etc. I mean, as the council's probably seen from the planning inspectorate's guidance at the report sort of stage, obviously myself and Mr. Rollings would need to finalise the report, and then it goes through internal quality assurance checking within the inspectorate, and then all local plan reports go to DLUC for at least 2 days, or sorry, 48 hours. Could potentially be longer depending on the nature of the report. But I think allowing for those kind of processes, if we are in the sort of the region of main modifications in February through to the end of March, I think obviously allowing for Easter, there are various commitments I know of already in 8 parts of April. I mean, I think we're probably looking at the council getting a fact check report in sort of early to mid-May. And I'm sure the council's aware from the last local plan. I mean, that fact check process is simply just that. It's it's not an opportunity to kind of reopen the merits of the plan, etc. It's to check on Mr. Rollings and myself's accuracy and cross-referencing to evidence, etc. And then shortly thereafter, you should be in a position to receive the the final report. Hopefully by end of May, possibly early June, depending where we are. So I think that's the sort of the ballpark. we're in at the moment. Are there any further or final matters from the council in terms of where we go from here? You know, I think probably the next thing you want to see is the sort of our post hearings letter and advice on that.
From sort of your earlier suggestions, you weren't looking for us to try and pull together a further schedule of the modifications based on the discussions of the last week. That's something that you will cover off using the schedule that we've submitted. Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, and we haven't asked for any sort of further evidence or any further information as part of this this examination. I mean, I think we've hopefully tried to help the council each time you've provided additional evidence at various stages. You know, that's largely been accepted. I think now we're at a very sort of late stage of the examination process, unless something significant, new and entirely unanticipated kind of comes out of the woodwork. I think we really want to sort of draw a line under further evidence and deal with the 30 pages of library index we have already. So there's a lot for us to take into account and reflect on. So if there's nothing further or anything further from the council to clarify. I mean, just for my sort of curiosity as a nosy inspector, I mean, I'm assuming some of the team were here for the last local plan, but for other members of the team we've heard from, is this a first local plan they've kind of examination they've participated in?
Yeah, it's been half and half. So myself, Sally and Anthony all were part of the original team for the adopted local plan, but for Kevin, Ian and Sophie, it's been new. And obviously for Sophie, she's our trainee as well, so it's been a very brand new experience, certainly. Okay. For them all.
Good. That's yeah, no, it's good to hear from you know, a variety of people. That doesn't always necessarily happen in plan examinations, so yeah, good to have heard from a wide variety of officers. Yeah,
they all know their areas very well, so
they do.
Certainly better than me.
I don't know. No. Okay, so I'm just now going to do sort of a formal closing statement for the benefit of these hearings, and then after which point myself and Mr. Rollings will leave the call, and yeah, the examination will move to a new phase of reporting. So I think what we'd just like to say after where we now 7 days of hearings of evidence over 2 weeks and a bit. Firstly, on behalf of myself and Mr. Rollings, who I think is in on this call, I think we'd like to thank everyone who's participated and attended the hearing sessions for their contributions. Found participants have been very helpful in the way that they've presented their submissions. We would like to thank the council's team for their hard work to date on the examination. Firstly, in the comprehensive initial responses and schedules of proposed changes, as well as the statements in response to our MIQs, which provided helpful detail and additional evidence, including in the appendices. And we would like to thank the council for their professionalism in these hearings, for explaining why the submitted plan should be considered sound, and their willingness, where appropriate, to consider and discuss potential changes. As I mentioned a moment ago, it's been positive for us to hear from various members of the planning policy team, not just Elizabeth Brigden and Sally Lepage are on the screen now, but as mentioned previously, Anthony Maston, Ian Warren, Kevin Dillon, and Sophie Gilbert from the team, as well as the helpful legal input from Mr. Forsdick, from your colleague Clark Gordon on water neutrality back in November from Mr. Monk, more recently on noise issues, and obviously from Mr. Clem Smith on town centre matters. And it's also been helpful that you've had various colleagues from West Sussex County Council and others to kind of help and assist on transportation and infrastructure matters. We're mindful that work has been ongoing prior to and during the hearings, and I think this gives us confidence that the examination can progress to main modifications efficiently and in good time. We would particularly like to thank the Programme Officer, Charlotte Blancy, I hope it's still in the call. Thank you, Charlotte, from both Glenn and myself for helping to make sure everything's run as smoothly as possible, liaising with representatives and being the key link, independent link between us and the council, and dealing with a whole host of matters efficiently and effectively. I think we're very appreciative to the council that it has engaged a professional programme officer. I mean, it really does make a difference to our lives as inspectors to have that support. And obviously, Charlotte as a programme officer, I think needs to obviously remain in place until we've delivered our final report to kind of remain that as that independent link. Going forward, we expect obviously the examination website to be maintained and updated at key points when we kind of reach various milestones. And for anybody watching this recording, we'd encourage, if you are interested in the local plan examination process, I think to refer to the website in terms of remaining up to date on the plan progress. We generally consider that we now have sufficient evidence and information to assess the soundness of the Crawley Borough local plan. We'll carefully consider all the points that have been put to us before coming to our conclusions, including the submissions we receive on proposed main modifications. And as indicated, we'll be setting out shortly in writing to the council our initial thoughts on what we consider will be the required main modifications. Can we remind the council that proposed detailed wording of all the proposed modifications and any accompanying kind of update or addendum to the sustainability appraisal, and if required, the habitat regulation assessment be submitted to the programme officer prior to consultation, so that we can just make sure there is kind of complete coverage. And I think it would be helpful for us to also see, for completeness, where you do a separate schedule of the kind of the minor factual changes, not necessarily needed for soundness, but the other say factual updates that you wish to undertake, and also to set out a schedule of proposed policies map changes. I think there's only about 2 or 3 in the schedule of modifications at the moment. They'll probably need to be teased out as a separate schedule. I think in getting to to main modifications, I think why we need that kind of coverage check is obviously we don't want anything to kind of be missed off and then we find ourselves having to do further consultation. We've provided this afternoon a broad indication of when we think the report will be the fact check report will be with the council. We think that'll be sometime in May. I mean, obviously, rest assured, we'll be trying to get a report to the council as soon as possible. And I think the office in Bristol will further kind of confirm with the council when it's likely to anticipate its report. And as mentioned a moment ago, for the fact check, it's exactly that. It's not an opportunity to reopen arguments, but obviously check the accuracy of the proposed changes and the overall content of the report. I think that concludes the closing remarks. I was going to say, I don't know, Mr. Rollins, is anything further you wish to add, or?
No, nothing from me. You've said it all very well.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so on behalf of myself and Mr. Rollins, we'll now formally bring these examination sessions to their conclusion. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. It's great to meet you all.
Thanks.